Walking into Sterling Dynamics on what I thought was my first day as a junior marketing coordinator, I froze when I saw him, Gary Morrison, my ex-boyfriend who had laughed in my face 2 years ago, saying I'd never amount to anything without his connections. He stood there in his expensive suit, smirking as he introduced himself as my new department head, clearly thinking he still had power over the naive girl he'd once controlled. What he didn't know was that I wasn't just another employee. I was about to become his worst nightmare, and by the end of the day he'd be the one begging. Lucy Rodriguez adjusts her blazer nervously as she steps through the gleaming glass doors of Sterling Dynamics. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. One of Chicago's most prestigious marketing firms, the morning sun streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the downtown high-rise, casting geometric shadows across the marble lobby. Her reflection in the polished surfaces shows a composed 28-year-old woman in a carefully chosen navy suit, professional but not too flashy for what she believes is her entry-level position. The security guard hands her a temporary badge that reads Junior Marketing Coordinator, Ella Rodriguez. She clips it to her jacket with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This is supposed to be her fresh start, her chance to rebuild her career in marketing after 2 years of struggle. The weight of her briefcase feels reassuring. Inside are copies of her portfolio, references from her freelance clients, and a notebook where she's practiced her introduction for weeks. As the elevator rises to the 23rd floor, Lucy's mind races through her preparation. She's researched every department head, memorized the company's recent campaigns, and even practiced small talk about the weather. The elevator dings softly, and the doors slide open to reveal a bustling office space filled with the energy of a successful agency. The moment Lucy steps onto the marketing floor, her blood runs cold. Standing near the reception desk, commanding attention from a group of junior employees, is a face she'd hoped never to see again. Gary Morrison, 6'2", dark hair perfectly styled, wearing what she immediately recognizes as a $3,000 suit. He's gesturing animatedly while explaining something to his audience, his voice carrying that same confident tone that once made her feel small. For a split second, she considers turning around and walking straight back to the elevator. Her heart pounds so loudly she's certain everyone can hear it. But before she can move, Gary's eyes sweep across the room and land directly on her. His expression shifts from professional presentation mode to something far more predatory, a slow spreading smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Well, Gary says, his voice cutting through the office chatter like a knife. Lucy Rodriguez, what a pleasant surprise. The way he emphasizes her name makes it sound like an inside joke that only he understands. The junior employees around him turn to look at her, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Lucy forces herself to breathe normally, drawing on every ounce of professional composure she's developed over the past 2 years. Gary, she responds evenly, though inside she's calculating the fastest route to the emergency exit. I didn't realize you worked here. Gary dismisses his audience with a casual wave, his attention now fully focused on Lucy. He approaches her with the confident stride of someone who believes he owns the room, and everyone in it. The other employees scatter, though several steal glances back, clearly sensing drama brewing. Oh, I don't just work here, Gary says, stopping just close enough to invade her personal space, a manipulation tactic she remembers all too well. I'm the senior director of creative marketing. I run this floor. He pauses, letting that information sink in before delivering what he clearly considers the killing blow. Which means, Lucy, that you work for me. The words hit her like a physical punch. Of all the marketing firms in Chicago, of all the departments in this building, she'd managed to walk directly into Gary's domain. The man who had systematically destroyed her confidence, sabotaged her early career attempts, and left her emotionally devastated, was now in a position of authority over her professional life. Gary's smile widens as he watches her process this information. Don't look so worried, he says, his tone dripping with false reassurance. I'm sure we can make this work. After all, you always were teachable. The word carries implications that make her skin crawl, memories of how he used to teach her that her ideas weren't good enough, her ambitions too lofty, her independence a threat to their relationship. Amanda, Gary calls out to the department coordinator, a friendly-looking woman in her 40s who hurries over with a welcoming smile. "This is our new junior coordinator, Lucy Rodriguez. She's going to need some extra guidance." The way he says guidance makes it clear that he's already establishing a narrative of incompetence around her. Amanda extends her hand warmly. "Welcome to Sterling Dynamics, Lucy. We're excited to have you on the team." Her genuine enthusiasm contrasts sharply with Gary's calculated coldness. "Thank you," Lucy manages, shaking Amanda's hand while acutely aware of Gary's presence looming beside them. She can feel him studying her reaction, feeding off her discomfort like a predator savoring fear. "Lucy and I have some history," Gary explains to Amanda, his tone suggesting shared professional experience rather than the toxic relationship that nearly destroyed Lucy's self-worth. "I'm looking forward to seeing how much she's learned since we last worked together." The lie is so smooth, so professionally packaged, that Amanda simply nods approvingly. As Amanda guides Lucy toward what will be her desk, a small cubicle with a clear view of Gary's corner office, Lucy's mind races beyond the immediate humiliation. 2 years ago, she would have crumbled under Gary's psychological manipulation. She would have believed his implied threats, accepted his narrative of her inadequacy, and probably quit within a week. But the woman walking through Sterling Dynamics today is not the same person Gary destroyed 2 years ago. As she settles into her supposedly junior position, Lucy allows herself a small, secret smile. Gary thinks he's won by establishing dominance on day one. But the woman walking through Sterling Dynamics today is not the same person Gary destroyed 2 years ago. As she settles into her supposedly junior position, he thinks he knows exactly who Lucy Rodriguez is and what she's capable of. What Gary doesn't know, what no one in this building knows except for 3 people in the executive boardroom upstairs, that Lucy isn't here as a junior marketing coordinator. She's here as part of a carefully orchestrated plan that's been 2 years in the making. The temporary badge clipped to her jacket is about to become the most expensive mistake Gary Morrison has ever made. The morning sun continues to stream through the office windows, but the light feels different now, not warming, but illuminating. In exactly 4 hours, during the company-wide meeting scheduled for 1 p.m., Gary Morrison is going to learn what Lucy Rodriguez has really amounted to. And for the first time in their toxic history, he's going to be the one who's powerless. Gary doesn't waste time establishing his dominance. Within minutes of Lucy settling into her cubicle, he appears beside her desk with a thick manila folder and that same predatory smile. "First day, first lesson," he announces loudly enough for nearby colleagues to hear. "I need you to compile a comprehensive analysis of our competitors' social media strategies from the past 6 months. Full report on my desk by 5 p.m. Lucy opens the folder to find hundreds of printed screenshots, analytics reports, and competitor profiles, easily 40 hours of work condensed into an impossible 8-hour deadline. Her colleagues steal sympathetic glances, recognizing the setup for what it is. Gary watches her face carefully, searching for signs of the panic and overwhelm he used to trigger so easily. "Is there a specific format you'd prefer for the analysis?" Lucy asks calmly, her voice betraying none of the anger burning in her chest. She's learned to mask her emotions, a skill Gary inadvertently taught her during their relationship. "Surprise me," Gary replies with mock encouragement. "I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always were creative with excuses." The barb lands exactly where he intended, referencing countless arguments where he'd dismissed her work as inadequate, or her explanations as elaborate justifications for failure. Amanda, observing from the neighboring desk, frowns slightly. She's worked with Gary long enough to recognize his patterns, though she's never seen him this openly hostile toward a new employee. "Gary, that seems like quite a lot for someone's first day," she ventures diplomatically. "Amanda, I appreciate your concern," Gary responds with practiced corporate smoothness. "But Lucy and I have an understanding, don't we, Lucy?" His tone suggests intimacy and shared history, while simultaneously making it clear that questioning his methods would be professionally unwise. 2 hours into her impossible assignment, Lucy has managed to organize the materials and create a preliminary framework for analysis. Her years of freelance work have taught her efficiency and strategic thinking, skills Gary never witnessed during their relationship, when she was still finding her professional footing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Gary chooses the bustling pre-lunch period to conduct his next assault. Team meeting, he announces, clapping his hands together. Conference room, now, I want to review some approaches to client strategy, and I think Lucy's perspective might be educational for everyone. The marketing team files into the glass-walled conference room, 8 professionals ranging from junior associates to senior managers. Lucy recognizes the setup immediately. Gary is about to use her as a teaching example of what not to do, just like he used to dissect her ideas during their relationship, until she stopped sharing them altogether. Lucy, Gary begins once everyone is seated. Why don't you share your initial thoughts on the Henderson Industries account? I know you've been reviewing their materials. He slides a client folder across the table with theatrical generosity. Lucy opens the folder to find a luxury automotive campaign, completely outside her supposed expertise in social media analysis. The account details are sparse, clearly grabbed from another project without context. It's a masterful trap. She'll either admit ignorance and look incompetent, or make uninformed suggestions that Gary can systematically demolish. Based on these preliminary materials, Lucy begins carefully. It appears Henderson Industries is targeting affluent consumers aged 35, might to 55, with disposable income for luxury purchases. She pauses, studying the limited information. However, I'd need to see their current market penetration data, customer acquisition costs, and brand awareness metrics before proposing any meaningful strategy adjustments. Gary's smile falters slightly. He'd expected her to stumble into speculation he could attack. Instead, she's demonstrated strategic thinking and professional caution. That's very thorough, he says, the compliment sounding like criticism. But sometimes in this business, Lucy, we need to think on our feet, make bold decisions with limited information. Not everyone can afford to overthink every detail. Sensing that his professional undermining isn't landing as effectively as planned, Gary shifts tactics to more familiar territory, personal destruction disguised as constructive feedback. You know, team, he continues, leaning back in his chair with casual authority, Lucy and I actually go way back. We worked together previously, and I have to say one thing I always admired about her was her persistence. The word persistence carries undertones that make Lucy's skin crawl. In Gary's vocabulary, it was code for stubbornness, an inability to accept when she was wrong, a character flaw that required constant correction. Even when projects weren't going well, Lucy would keep pushing her original ideas instead of adapting to feedback. It's admirable, in a way, but not always practical in client-facing situations. Several team members shift uncomfortably, recognizing the inappropriateness of publicly discussing a colleague's alleged shortcomings from previous employment. Amanda looks particularly troubled, her professional instincts clearly raising red flags about Gary's approach. For instance, Gary continues, warming to his theme, I remember one campaign where Lucy became so attached to her creative vision that she couldn't see why it wasn't resonating with focus groups. Sometimes you have to know when to let go of personal pride and accept that maybe, just maybe, your instincts aren't always right. Lucy feels the familiar weight of Gary's psychological manipulation, the way he could take any professional setback and transform it into evidence of her fundamental inadequacy. But something is different this time. Instead of the crushing self-doubt she once felt, Lucy experiences a cold, calculating clarity. Don't get me wrong, Gary says, addressing the increasingly uncomfortable room while keeping his eyes fixed on Lucy. I believe everyone deserves a chance to grow. That's why I was actually excited when I saw Lucy's name on our new hire list. It'll be interesting to see how much she's learned since our last collaboration. He stands, moving to the whiteboard, with the confident stride of someone delivering a masterclass. The thing about this industry is that it rewards adaptability. Clients change their minds. Market conditions shift, budgets get slashed overnight. Success belongs to people who can pivot quickly and leave their ego at the door. His gaze returns to Lucy with laser focus. Some people naturally understand this flexibility. Others, he shrugs dramatically. Well, they tend to struggle with feedback, get defensive about criticism, and ultimately find themselves cycling through entry-level positions because they can't accept guidance from more experienced professionals. The prediction hangs in the air like a verdict. Gary has essentially told the entire team that Lucy is destined to fail, that her presence here is temporary, and that her defensive reactions to his guidance will prove his point. It's character assassination disguised as management insight. As the meeting disperses, Lucy notices the subtle shift in her colleagues' behavior. Gary's performance has achieved its intended effect, planting seeds of doubt about her competence and stability. Conversations quiet when she approaches. Invitations to grab coffee don't materialize. The natural camaraderie of a new team member's first day evaporates into polite distance. Lucy, Gary says, approaching her desk as she gathers materials for the afternoon, I hope you don't take any of that personally. It's just that I've seen talented people sabotage themselves because no one was willing to give them honest feedback. His tone suggests paternal concern rather than workplace bullying. I want you to succeed here, he continues, perching on the edge of her desk with practiced casualness. But that means being open to learning, being coachable, maybe letting go of some of the habits that held you back before. Each word is carefully chosen to sound like guidance while reinforcing his narrative of her inadequacy. Lucy looks up at him, this man who once convinced her that her dreams were naive, her ambitions unrealistic, her independence a character flaw requiring correction. I appreciate the feedback, Gary, she says with perfect professional composure. I'm always interested in learning from experienced colleagues. But behind her calm expression, Lucy is counting down the hours until 1 p.m., when Gary Morrison will discover exactly how much Lucy Rodriguez has learned, and what she's really capable of when she's no longer under his control. As the afternoon sun streams through Sterling Dynamics' floor-to-ceiling windows, Lucy finds herself staring at Gary's corner office while mechanically sorting through competitor analysis data. The familiar sight of him leaning back in his executive chair, feet propped up while scrolling through his phone, triggers a cascade of memories she's spent 2 years trying to suppress. It was exactly this same pose, arrogant, dismissive, utterly confident in his superiority, that had defined their final argument. Lucy closes her eyes briefly, letting herself remember not the pain, but the lessons that followed. Because what Gary doesn't know, what no one in this building knows, is that the woman sitting in cubicle 47B isn't the same person who once begged for his approval. 2 years ago, Lucy Rodriguez was a different person entirely. Fresh out of Northwestern's marketing program, she'd been hired as a junior associate at Morrison & Associates, Gary's family firm where his father was managing partner. She'd been brilliant, eager and hopelessly naive about office politics and toxic relationships. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd fallen for Gary Morrison twice, first professionally, dazzled by his confidence and apparent success, then personally, when he'd swept her off her feet with expensive dinners and promises of mentorship that quickly became control. Lucy allows herself to remember those first months at Morrison & Associates. She'd been assigned to Gary's team working on the Meridian Hotels account, a $50 million rebranding campaign that represented the firm's biggest client. Gary had been charming then, 10 years her senior with an MBA from Wharton and connections throughout Chicago's business elite. You have real potential, he'd told her during their first one-on-one meeting, his office overlooking Lake Michigan. But potential means nothing without proper guidance. Lucky for you, I see something special in your work. Those words had been intoxicating to a 26-year-old desperate to prove herself. Gary had positioned himself as both mentor and protector, shielding her from office politics while gradually isolating her from other colleagues. They're jealous of your talent, he'd explained, when she noticed the cold shoulders from peers. That's why you need to focus on impressing the people who matter, like me. The personal relationship had developed slowly, carefully orchestrated by Gary. Late nights working on campaigns became dinner dates. Professional mentoring sessions became intimate conversations about their futures. Within 6 months, Lucy had moved into Gary's Lincoln Park penthouse, convinced she'd found both career success and romantic fulfillment. But Gary's version of love was possession, and his mentorship was manipulation disguised as guidance. What Gary never knew, what Lucy had never told him, was that the Meridian Hotels campaign that made his career was almost entirely her creation. While he was networking at industry events and schmoozing clients over expensive lunches, Lucy had been burning midnight oil developing the revolutionary home away from home concept that transformed Meridian from a struggling mid-tier chain into a luxury hospitality brand. She'd developed the customer journey mapping, created the emotional positioning strategy, and even written the tagline that became Meridian's signature, where every stay becomes a story. But when the campaign launched to industry acclaim, Gary had presented it as his vision, with Lucy credited merely as supporting research. "You did great background work," he'd told her, when she expressed frustration about the credit allocation, "but clients need to see leadership from someone with experience. You'll get your moment when you're ready for it." That moment never came. Instead, Gary used Lucy's ideas to secure promotion after promotion, while keeping her locked in a junior role, dependent on his approval for any career advancement. The Meridian success led to Gary's appointment as senior director, a position that should have elevated his entire team, but somehow only benefited him. The beginning of the end came 18 months into their relationship, when Lucy accidentally discovered Gary's true opinion of her contributions. She'd returned to the office late one evening to retrieve her laptop and overheard Gary on a conference call with potential investors for his planned departure from his father's firm. "The key to my success at Morrison & Associates has been knowing how to leverage talent," Gary's voice carried clearly through his office door. "You find hungry young associates, give them just enough recognition to keep them motivated, then package their best work under experienced leadership. Clients trust experience over innovation." Lucy had frozen in the hallway, listening to Gary systematically take credit for every campaign success she'd contributed to over the past year and a half. But the knife twist came when the investor asked about his team's retention. "Honestly, most junior talent burns out or moves on," Gary had laughed. "They get ideas above their station, start thinking they deserve equal credit. The smart ones learn to be team players. The difficult ones, well, they usually eliminate themselves from consideration for advancement." When asked specifically about standout performers, Gary had paused before answering. "I've got one associate who's quite capable, but she's become a bit too attached to individual recognition. Classic case of someone who doesn't understand that success requires knowing your place in the hierarchy." That night, Lucy had returned to Gary's penthouse with a clarity she'd never experienced. When he arrived home at midnight, slightly drunk from his investor dinner, she was waiting in the living room with 2 packed suitcases. "What's this about?" Gary had asked, his tone shifting from confusion to the controlled anger she'd learned to fear. "I'm leaving," Lucy had said simply. Both the relationship and Morrison & Associates, Gary's reaction had been swift and brutal. "You're making a huge mistake, Lucy. You have no idea how this industry works without proper connections. My father's firm is the best opportunity you'll ever get." When she'd remained unmoved, Gary had played his final card. "Fine, leave, but understand what you're walking away from. You'll never amount to anything without my guidance. This industry chews up naive idealists like you and spits them out. In 2 years you'll be begging to come back, and I'll remember exactly why I couldn't recommend you." His parting words had been calculated to destroy her confidence. "You're talented, Lucy, but talent without wisdom is worthless, and wisdom comes from accepting that some people are meant to lead, and others are meant to follow. You'll learn that the hard way." But Gary Morrison had made one crucial miscalculation. He'd assumed that destroying Lucy's confidence would destroy her potential. Instead, his cruelty had become the catalyst for her transformation from naive associate to strategic visionary. As Lucy returns to the present moment, watching Gary through his office window, she allows herself a small smile. In exactly 6 hours, Gary Morrison will discover just how much Lucy Rodriguez has amounted to, and this time, he'll be the one learning the hard way. At 12:30 p.m., Gary orchestrates his next psychological assault with the precision of a master manipulator. As the marketing team prepares for their lunch break, he appears at Lucy's cubicle with theatrical concern. "Lucy, before you head out, could we have a quick word? I noticed you seemed a bit overwhelmed during this morning's meeting." The phrasing is deliberately loaded, positioning her natural caution as incompetence, while establishing himself as the observant leader who notices employee struggles. Several colleagues pause their lunch preparations, inadvertently becoming witnesses to Gary's performance. "I'm concerned that maybe the transition back into corporate environment might be more challenging than you anticipated." Gary continues, his voice carrying just enough volume for nearby desks to overhear. "There's no shame in admitting when something feels beyond your current skill level." Lucy recognizes the pattern immediately. It's the same technique Gary used during their relationship, publicly expressing concern for her limitations while privately undermining her confidence. He's painting her as fragile, overwhelmed, and potentially unsuited for the role, all while appearing to be a supportive manager. "I appreciate your concern," Lucy responds evenly, "but I'm confident I can handle the workload. The competitor analysis is progressing well, and I should have preliminary findings ready by end of day." Gary's smile tightens almost imperceptibly. Her composed response isn't fitting his narrative of the struggling employee who needs rescuing. "That's optimistic," he says. "Just remember, it's better to ask for help early than to deliver substandard work. We have standards here at Sterling Dynamics." 2 hours later, Gary implements his most insidious tactic yet. As Lucy returns from lunch, she finds him at her desk, rifling through her competitor analysis materials. "Perfect timing," he announces. "Elise from the Henderson Industries account just called. They want to discuss some preliminary ideas, and I thought this would be a great learning opportunity for you." Before Lucy can respond, Gary has transferred the incoming call to her line. "Henderson Industries. This is Lucy Rodriguez from Sterling Dynamics." She answers professionally, while Gary leans against her cubicle wall, arms crossed in obvious supervision. "Miss Rodriguez," comes the client's voice through the speakerphone. "Gary mentioned you'd been reviewing our account. We're interested in hearing some fresh perspectives on our Q2 campaign direction." Lucy feels the trap closing around her. She's been given no context about the client's needs, budget, or previous campaign performance. Any response she gives will either be too generic to be useful or too specific to be accurate. Gary is watching her with predatory satisfaction, knowing that this call will either expose her lack of information or force her to admit ignorance in front of a major client. "I'd be happy to share some initial observations," Lucy begins carefully, "though I want to ensure I'm giving you the most strategic recommendations possible. Could we schedule a more detailed discussion after I've had a chance to review your complete campaign history and current market position?" Gary's expression darkens. Her diplomatic response has avoided the immediate trap, but he quickly intervenes. "Actually, Lucy, Elise is quite busy. I think she'd appreciate hearing your immediate thoughts based on what you've already reviewed." The manipulation is transparent to Lucy but invisible to the client. Gary is forcing her into an impossible position while appearing to advocate for her expertise. After the client call ends with Gary smoothly taking over and promising follow-up materials, Lucy watches him systematically poison her relationships with team members. He approaches Duke, a senior strategist, with apparent confidentiality. "Listen, I need your honest opinion about something," Gary says in a stage whisper clearly intended for Lucy to overhear. "I'm trying to give Lucy every opportunity to succeed, but I'm worried about her adjustment period. You saw how she handled the Henderson call, a lot of hesitation, not much concrete strategic thinking." Duke glances uncomfortably between Gary and Lucy's cubicle. "She seemed professional enough to me. Maybe she just needs more background information. That's what concerns me," Gary continues. "In our previous working relationship, Lucy had a tendency to over-research instead of trusting her instincts. Great in academic settings, but clients need confidence and quick strategic pivots. I'm just trying to help her develop those skills." The conversation continues as Gary visits other team members, each time sharing concerns about Lucy's performance while positioning himself as the patient mentor trying to help a struggling employee. By mid-afternoon, Lucy can feel the shift in office dynamics. Colleagues who'd been friendly that morning now offer polite but distant interactions. At 3 p.m., Gary calls Lucy into his office for what he terms an informal check-in. The space is designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows behind his desk create a backlit silhouette effect, while Lucy sits in a deliberately lower chair facing the light. "I want to be transparent with you, Lucy," Gary begins, opening a manila folder labeled with her name. "I've been documenting your adjustment period, and I'm seeing some patterns that concern me." He slides a paper across the desk, a preliminary performance evaluation filled with subjective assessments: difficulty adapting to team dynamics, resistance to guidance, struggles with time management under pressure. Each critique is carefully worded to sound objective while being entirely subjective. "I understand this might feel overwhelming," Gary continues with practiced sympathy, "but I want to help you succeed. The question is whether you're willing to accept coaching and make the necessary adjustments." Lucy scans the document, recognizing it as a setup for eventual termination. Gary is creating a paper trail that portrays her as a problematic employee who refused guidance and failed to meet standards. It's the same systematic character assassination he'd used to justify taking credit for her work at Morrison and Associates. "I appreciate the feedback," Lucy responds calmly, though internally she's cataloging every manipulation tactic for future reference. "I'm always open to improvement." The final hour of Gary's campaign plays out with surgical precision. He implements what Lucy recognizes as complete professional isolation, ensuring she's excluded from impromptu team discussions, overlooked for collaborative projects, and subtly discouraged from participating in office social dynamics. When Carla from graphic design stops by to introduce herself to the new team member, Gary intercepts with practiced ease. "Carla, actually, could you help me with the Morrison Industries presentation?" Lucy's working on a detailed analysis project that requires her full concentration. The message is clear: Lucy is too busy, too overwhelmed, or too problematic for normal team integration. By 4 p.m., she's effectively become invisible within her own department, isolated at her desk, while the rest of the team collaborates freely around her. But Gary's masterpiece of manipulation has one fatal flaw. He's so focused on recreating the power dynamic that destroyed Lucy 2 years ago that he hasn't noticed the most important change. This Lucy isn't fighting back because she doesn't need to. She's simply waiting. As 5 p.m. approaches and the office begins to empty, Lucy gathers her materials with the calm satisfaction of someone who knows that tomorrow will bring a very different dynamic to Sterling Dynamics. Gary Morrison has just spent 8 hours systematically demonstrating exactly why he's unfit to lead, and in 12 hours the entire company will understand exactly what that means. At 4:45 p.m., just as the office begins its end-of-day rhythm, Gary orchestrates what he clearly intends to be his masterpiece of psychological destruction. "All hands meeting," he announces to the marketing floor, his voice carrying the authority of someone who believes he controls every narrative in the room. "Conference Room A. I want to discuss team dynamics and performance standards before we wrap up today." The timing is deliberate. Late enough that everyone is tired and eager to leave, creating an audience that will be receptive to quick, decisive action. Gary has spent the entire day painting Lucy as a problematic employee, and now he's ready to deliver the public verdict that will justify any future actions against her. As the team files into the glass-walled conference room, Lucy notices the strategic seating arrangement Gary has orchestrated. Her chair is positioned directly opposite his, isolated from the rest of the team, with clear sight lines for everyone to observe her reactions. The setup resembles a tribunal more than a team meeting. "Before we discuss tomorrow's client presentations," Gary begins, settling into his chair with theatrical authority, "I want to address something that's been weighing on my mind. We pride ourselves on being a collaborative, high-performing team here at Sterling Dynamics, but collaboration requires trust, and trust requires transparency about performance expectations." His gaze sweeps the room before landing squarely on Lucy. "Sometimes, as leaders, we have to make difficult decisions about whether someone is the right fit for our team culture." Gary opens the folder he's been carrying, making a show of reviewing documents that Lucy recognizes as the performance evaluation he'd shown her earlier. "I've been observing our newest team member closely today, and I'm seeing some concerning patterns that I think we need to address openly." The phrase "concerning patterns" sends a chill through the room. Several team members shift uncomfortably, recognizing that they're about to witness a professional execution disguised as constructive feedback. "Lucy," Gary continues, his tone suggesting disappointed mentorship rather than workplace bullying. "You've shown some technical capabilities, but I'm worried about your integration with our team culture. Leadership isn't just about individual performance, it's about elevating everyone around you." He pauses for effect, letting the implied criticism settle before delivering his carefully crafted character assassination. "For instance, during today's client call with Henderson Industries, I noticed a reluctance to share strategic insights. When clients are paying premium rates for our expertise, hesitation can be interpreted as lack of confidence in our capabilities." Lucy feels the familiar rage building, the same fury she'd experienced 2 years ago when Gary systematically dismantled her confidence. But this time, instead of defensive panic, she experiences cold, calculating clarity. She knows exactly what Gary is doing and why, and more importantly, she knows it no longer has power over her. Additionally, Gary continues, warming to his theme, "I've observed some resistance to collaborative feedback during our team discussions. Success in this industry requires adaptability and openness to guidance from more experienced colleagues." The room's energy shifts as Gary's performance continues. Amanda looks increasingly uncomfortable, her professional instincts clearly recognizing the inappropriateness of publicly dissecting a colleague's alleged shortcomings. Duke and Carla exchange meaningful glances, understanding that they're witnessing something that crosses ethical lines. But Gary has also cultivated enablers, junior associates, who depend on his approval for advancement, and who nod along with his assessment rather than risk challenging their department head. Lucas, a recent hire who's clearly intimidated by Gary's authority, actually takes notes as if Gary's character assassination constitutes legitimate management training. "The thing is," Gary says, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of someone who believes he's delivering a masterclass in leadership, "talent without teamwork is actually counterproductive. I've seen brilliant individuals sabotage entire projects because they couldn't accept that sometimes experience trumps innovation." His gaze returns to Lucy with laser focus. "In my previous experience working with Lucy, I observed a pattern of becoming attached to personal ideas, rather than serving the client's best interests. It's a common issue with high-achieving individuals who haven't learned to subordinate ego to team success. The psychological manipulation is exquisite in its cruelty. Gary is using Lucy's actual strengths: innovation, strong ideas, high achievement, and reframing them as character flaws that make her unsuitable for team environments." Gary stands, moving to the whiteboard with the theatrical flair of someone delivering a closing argument. "Here's what I want everyone to understand about performance standards at Sterling Dynamics," he begins, writing bullet points as he speaks. "Client service above personal recognition, team success over individual achievement, adaptability over attachment to specific approaches." Each point is clearly directed at Lucy, a public indictment of her alleged failures disguised as general team guidance. "Some people naturally understand these principles," Gary continues, his voice carrying the weight of professional judgment. "Others need more time to develop the maturity required for client-facing roles." The implication hangs in the air like a verdict: Lucy lacks the maturity for her current position. Gary has essentially told the entire team that she's on probation, that her continued employment depends on fundamental personality changes, and that her colleagues should expect continued problems from her presence. "I believe in giving people opportunities to grow," Gary says, returning to his seat with magnanimous authority, "but growth requires acknowledgement of areas needing improvement. Lucy, I hope you'll take this feedback in the spirit it's intended, as an investment in your professional development." As the meeting concludes, Gary delivers what he clearly intends as the killing blow. "One more thing," he says, as team members begin gathering their materials. "Lucy, I'm going to recommend that you observe rather than participate in tomorrow's client presentations. Consider it a learning opportunity to see how experienced team members handle high-stakes client interactions. The public demotion is delivered with such casual authority that several team members don't immediately recognize its significance. Gary has just removed Lucy from active client work, relegating her to observer status in front of the entire team. It's professional humiliation disguised as mentorship. Of course, Lucy responds with perfect composure, though inside she's marveling at Gary's tactical mistake. By publicly humiliating her in front of witnesses, he's given her documentation of his behavior that will be invaluable in the hours to come. As the team disperses, Lucy notices the divided reactions. Amanda approaches her desk with obvious concern, while several junior associates avoid eye contact entirely. Gary has successfully created the impression that Lucy is a problematic employee whose continued presence threatens team dynamics. But Gary Morrison has made one crucial error in his campaign of psychological destruction. He's been so focused on recreating the power dynamic that worked 2 years ago that he's failed to consider the possibility that Lucy Rodriguez might have learned something from their previous encounter. As the office empties and Gary settles into his corner office to savor his victory, Lucy gathers her materials with the calm satisfaction of someone who knows that in exactly 18 hours, the entire power structure of Sterling Dynamics will shift irrevocably. The breaking point Gary thinks he's created in her is actually his own professional death warrant. He just doesn't know it yet. As the conference room empties and colleagues avoid her gaze, Lucy remains seated for a moment longer than necessary. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, casting harsh shadows across the polished table where Gary has just systematically attempted to destroy her professional reputation. But instead of the crushing despair she might have felt 2 years ago, Lucy experiences something entirely different, a cold, crystalline clarity that cuts through every emotion. She watches Gary through the glass walls as he returns to his corner office, already pulling out his phone to make what she assumes are calls to other department heads, spreading his narrative about the problematic new hire who requires careful management. His body language radiates satisfaction. The predator who has successfully isolated his prey and established dominance over the territory. But Gary Morrison has made a fundamental miscalculation. The woman sitting in conference room A isn't the same person he destroyed at Morrison and Associates. That Lucy had been naive, dependent on his approval, desperate to prove herself worthy of his guidance. This Lucy has spent 2 years building something Gary could never understand: genuine independence, real expertise, and most importantly, the strategic patience to wait for the perfect moment to strike back. Lucy pulls out her phone and opens her notes app, methodically documenting every detail of Gary's performance over the past 8 hours. The impossible deadline designed to overwhelm her. The public critique intended to undermine her competence. The client call sabotage that could have damaged her professional reputation. The team manipulation that systematically isolated her from colleagues. The performance review threat that created a paper trail for future termination. And finally, the public humiliation disguised as constructive feedback. Each incident represents not just workplace bullying, but a pattern of behavior that violates every principle of ethical leadership Sterling Dynamics claims to value. Lucy stands and walks to the conference room windows, looking out at Chicago's skyline as the evening sun begins its descent behind the glass towers of the financial district. From this height, the city looks manageable, orderly, a grid of possibilities waiting to be navigated by someone with the right strategy and sufficient patience. She mentally reviews the assets Gary doesn't know she possesses. First, the documentation she's been gathering all day. Not just notes, but audio recordings captured by the voice memo app on her phone during every interaction. Gary's confident assumption that she's powerless has made him careless about witnesses and evidence. Second, the relationships she's been quietly building with key Sterling Dynamics personnel over the past month through her informational interviews as part of the job application process. Amanda's obvious discomfort with Gary's management style, Duke's professional respect for ethical leadership. Carla's experience with previous toxic managers that makes her sensitive to manipulation tactics. Third, and most importantly, the information she possesses about Sterling Dynamics' internal operations that Gary assumes she couldn't have accessed. Her junior coordinator application process had been surprisingly thorough, requiring security clearances and background checks typically reserved for senior management positions. The HR department had been remarkably interested in her thoughts about company culture and leadership effectiveness. But the most significant asset Gary doesn't know about is time. While he's been focused on establishing immediate dominance over what he assumes is a powerless subordinate, Lucy has been operating on a completely different timeline, one that reaches far beyond his current understanding of the situation. Lucy returns to her cubicle and opens her laptop, accessing encrypted files she's maintained throughout her 2-year journey from destroyed ex-girlfriend to strategic professional. The documents tell a story Gary never suspected: extensive research into Sterling Dynamics' client base, competitive positioning, and internal leadership challenges that led to their recent recruitment drive for transformational talent. Her fingers move across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, sending carefully crafted messages to contacts Gary doesn't know exist. Dr. Patricia Wells, her former professor at Northwestern who now serves on Sterling Dynamics' advisory board. Marcus Chen, the executive recruiter who had initially approached her about opportunities in Chicago's marketing landscape. Elena Vasquez, the business journalist who specializes in corporate culture exposés for Chicago Business Weekly. Each message is professional, measured, and strategically timed. She's not asking for immediate intervention, she's positioning pieces for a larger game that Gary can't see because he's focused on winning today's battle, while completely unaware that he's already lost the war. The responses come quickly. Dr. Wells confirms that the board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning will proceed as planned. Marcus expresses interest in her workplace culture observations and suggests a call later this evening. Elena requests a meeting to discuss industry leadership trends that could make for compelling journalism. As the office continues to empty around her, Lucy allows herself to remember the exact moment 2 years ago when she made the decision that would lead to this day. Standing in Gary's penthouse apartment, suitcases packed, listening to him predict her inevitable failure, she had experienced a revelation that transformed humiliation into fuel. Gary had been right about one thing: success in their industry did require understanding hierarchies and power dynamics. Where he'd been wrong was assuming that understanding meant accepting his position at the top of that hierarchy. Instead, Lucy had spent 2 years learning how real power operates, not through intimidation and manipulation, but through competence, strategic thinking, and the patience to position yourself where your talents can create maximum impact. The freelance consulting work hadn't just been survival, it had been graduate-level education in business strategy, client management, and organizational psychology. Every difficult client had taught her something about reading people and situations. Every successful project had built her confidence in her own judgment. Every month of independence had strengthened her ability to operate without external validation. More importantly, she'd learned to recognize and counter the manipulation tactics that had once rendered her powerless. Gary's entire playbook, the impossible deadlines, public humiliation, isolation strategies, paper trail creation, now seemed not devastating but predictable, even pathetic in its reliance on psychological coercion rather than legitimate authority. At 5:30 p.m., as the last colleagues gather their belongings and head for the elevators, Lucy completes her final preparations for tomorrow's revelation. She uploads her day's documentation to secure cloud storage, forwards key correspondence to her personal email, and reviews the timeline she's been following for the past 6 months. Gary appears at her cubicle one last time, clearly unable to resist delivering a final psychological blow to what he assumes is his defeated victim. "Lucy," he says with false concern, "I hope you don't take today's feedback personally. Sometimes the kindest thing a leader can do is help someone recognize when they're not quite ready for a particular challenge." "I appreciate your perspective," Lucy responds with perfect composure, meeting his gaze directly. It's been quite educational. Something in her tone, too calm, too controlled, makes Gary pause slightly. For just a moment, uncertainty flickers across his features, but then his confidence reasserts itself, buoyed by a day of unchallenged dominance. "Get some rest," he says patronizingly. Tomorrow's going to be another learning opportunity for you. As Gary walks away, Lucy allows herself the first genuine smile she's felt all day. Gary Morrison is absolutely right about tomorrow being a learning opportunity. He just has no idea who's going to be doing the learning. She gathers her materials, clips her temporary badge to her briefcase, and heads for the elevator. In 14 hours, Sterling Dynamics will host the most memorable board meeting in its corporate history, and Gary Morrison will finally understand what Lucy Rodriguez has really amounted to. Lucy's Lincoln Park apartment transforms into a strategic command center as she sheds her junior coordinator facade. 3 monitors display encrypted files and research databases, representing months of preparation. Her phone buzzes with the first scheduled call from Marcus Chen, the recruiter who initially approached her. Gary Morrison performed exactly as predicted, Lucy reports. The documentation will be comprehensive. What Gary doesn't know is that Lucy's hiring wasn't coincidental. Sterling Dynamics had been quietly investigating leadership problems in their marketing division for months, following complaints from former employees and client concerns about project management. Dr. Patricia Wells, Lucy's former professor and Sterling Dynamics advisory board member, calls with satisfaction. Gary exceeded our worst expectations, demonstrating every toxic leadership behavior we discussed. The plan had originated 6 months ago, when Wells shared the board's struggle with addressing Gary's leadership issues. His family connections made direct action politically complicated, requiring documented evidence from someone with credibility. The solution was elegant: place Lucy where Gary would inevitably reveal his true management style, while documenting everything for board review. Elena Vasquez from Chicago Business Weekly joins the conference call, reviewing Lucy's documentation with professional fascination. This represents a perfect case study in systematic workplace manipulation. Gary's behavior provides textbook examples of toxic leadership. Elena's investigative work on corporate culture has earned national recognition, and Sterling Dynamics' transformation represents an opportunity to demonstrate how boards can take decisive action against workplace toxicity. Lucy reviews financial documents revealing Gary's hidden failures. While he reports consistent growth, deeper analysis shows client retention declined 23%, employee turnover exceeds company averages by 45%, and major accounts have requested different leadership. Most significantly, Gary's signature achievement, the Meridian Hotels campaign he'd stolen credit for, is being re-evaluated due to long-term performance issues. A forensic accountant confirms that Gary's department shows the highest operational costs relative to revenue generation of any division. Lucy completes her comprehensive report combining observational data with months of strategic research. Her executive summary reads like an indictment. Gary Morrison's leadership demonstrates classic patterns of workplace manipulation, creating long-term organizational damage that threatens employee retention and client relationships. CEO Sterling's final message confirms tomorrow's significance. Looking forward to your presentation. The board is prepared for significant changes. Gary's systematic destruction of Lucy has provided the board with everything needed to make long-contemplated leadership changes. His cruelty has become the catalyst for his own professional elimination. As Lucy prepares for bed, she imagines Gary's face when he discovers the junior coordinator is actually the strategic consultant hired to evaluate his fitness for leadership. Tomorrow, he'll learn that the most dangerous opponent is the one who lets you believe you're winning until you discover you've already lost. Lucy arrives at Sterling Dynamics at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before Gary's typical start time. The building's quiet provides perfect opportunity to observe workplace dynamics without Gary's manipulative presence. Amanda arrives at 7:15 a.m., nearly an hour early, a survival strategy Lucy has documented for weeks. "You're here early," Amanda says, with surprise, finding Lucy already working. "I wanted to get a head start," Lucy replies, though her real purpose is gathering final intelligence about team dynamics. Through casual conversation, Amanda unconsciously reveals crucial information about departmental morale and client retention issues. The marketing department has changed quite a bit since Gary took over 18 months ago. Amanda admits, the careful phrasing revealing everything Lucy needs to know about Gary's true impact. As team members arrive between 7:30 and 8 a.m., Lucy engages in seemingly casual conversations that reveal Gary's systematic destruction of department culture. Duke arrives exhausted, mentioning sleeplessness due to stress about the Henderson Industries presentation. Gary's made it clear that any mistakes will have consequences, Duke confides. It's created enormous pressure, especially since we don't have complete information about client expectations. Carla shares damaging insights about Gary's fear-based management. I've never seen someone create such an atmosphere of fear around client work. People are afraid to suggest innovations because Gary takes any alternative perspective as challenging his authority. The pattern becomes clear. Gary has systematically created an environment where team members fear contributing meaningfully. At 8:15 a.m., Lucy witnesses a phone call that provides crucial evidence about Gary's client management approach. Henderson Industries calls early, reaching Amanda instead of Gary, revealing troubling insights about the client relationship. We've been working with Sterling Dynamics for 6 months, but communication has been challenging, the client explains. Gary seems more interested in impressing us with his expertise than understanding our actual needs. We specifically requested to work with the team member who did the preliminary analysis, the client continues, referring to Lucy's work during her interview process. Gary keeps steering conversations back to his own ideas, but we were impressed by the strategic thinking in those initial reports. This provides powerful evidence of Gary's actual impact on client relationships. While Gary remains absent, Lucy uses legitimate access to shared files to gather intelligence about his work patterns. What she discovers validates every suspicion. Gary systematically takes credit for team innovations while distancing himself from failures. Email chains reveal Gary presenting team ideas as his own insights during client communications, while internal messages show his tendency to blame individuals for problems. Performance evaluation files demonstrate systematic documentation of team members' alleged shortcomings, while attributing successes to his leadership. 3 talented professionals have left in 6 months, all citing cultural misalignment representing significant talent loss and recruitment costs Gary's reports don't account for. At 8:45 a.m., Gary arrives, immediately transforming department energy from collaborative productivity to tense surveillance. Lucy observes subtle but immediate changes as team members shift into defensive mode under Gary's presence. Gary approaches with theatrical concern, planning another performance. Lucy, I hope you took yesterday's feedback to heart. Today's client presentations will be an excellent opportunity for you to observe how experienced professionals handle high-stakes situations. But Lucy notices something Gary doesn't. Team members exchange meaningful glances, suggesting growing awareness of his manipulation tactics. Amanda shows barely concealed disapproval. Duke looks uncomfortable with Gary's condescension. Even Lucas seems to recognize the inappropriateness. The intelligence reveals Gary's support is more fragile than his confidence suggests. Team members comply from fear, not respect, a fragile foundation about to collapse when they discover Lucy's true position. As the morning progresses toward the 10 a.m. board meeting, Lucy completes her intelligence gathering with satisfaction. Gary has provided more than enough evidence to justify the dramatic changes coming to Sterling Dynamics' marketing department. At 9:30 a.m., Lucy observes Sterling Dynamics executive leadership moving toward the 42nd floor boardroom. CEO Richard Sterling emerges from the executive elevator, followed by Dr. Patricia Wells and 3 board members Lucy recognizes from her strategic research. Their body language conveys the gravity of today's proceedings. This isn't routine review, but a decisive moment that will reshape company leadership structure. Dr. Wells catches Lucy's eye and offers an imperceptible nod, confirming everything proceeds according to plan. Gary, focused on establishing dominance over the marketing team, remains oblivious to executive activity occurring floors above. He's berating Duke about Henderson Industries materials, unaware that Henderson's feedback is already part of the comprehensive leadership evaluation prepared upstairs. CEO Sterling's message confirms board assembled, your presentation materials reviewed and approved. Ready to proceed at 10 o'clock sharp, Lucy returns to her cubicle and begins final positioning. She opens the competitor analysis Gary assigned, work she completed in 2 hours. Despite his expectation it would overwhelm her. The comprehensive report demonstrates her superior analytical capabilities while exposing Gary's superficial strategic work. Amanda approaches with concern. Lucy, I wanted to apologize for yesterday's meeting. Gary's approach was inappropriate. Your strategic insights were actually quite valuable. Carla stops by with similar observations. Your preliminary Henderson analysis addresses issues we've struggled with for months. It's exactly the innovative thinking this department needs. Each validation confirms what the board suspects: departmental problems stem from leadership that suppresses rather than cultivates talent. At 9:45 a.m., Lucy uploads her final intelligence report to the secure board portal Gary doesn't know exists. The comprehensive document synthesizes 24 hours of systematic observation with months of strategic research, creating an irrefutable case for immediate leadership change. The executive summary reads, like Gary's professional death sentence, subject demonstrated consistent patterns of employee intimidation, client relationship mismanagement, and systematic suppression of team innovation. Dr. Wells confirms documentation received and distributed. Evidence is comprehensive and damning. Richard is particularly concerned about client relationship implications. Gary chooses the final 15 minutes before the board meeting to provide additional evidence of his leadership unfitness. Sensing Lucy's competence might threaten his dominance, he escalates psychological warfare. Team meeting, Gary announces. I want to review presentation protocols. In the conference room, Gary delivers what he considers a masterclass in management philosophy. Success requires understanding hierarchy. Clients need confident leadership, not hesitation from team members who haven't earned strategic input rights. Gary's presentation becomes increasingly toxic as he systematically dismisses every team suggestion. His explicit leadership philosophy: my job is ensuring client interactions reflect departmental expertise through experienced leadership. Individual team members contribute through execution, not strategic improvisation. At 9:58 a.m., Gary delivers his final act of professional self-destruction. Lucy, I hope today's presentation clarified your role. Observation and learning are valuable development steps. Maybe in a few months, you'll be ready for substantial contributions. The condescension is so blatant that even Gary's enablers look uncomfortable. Amanda's professional composure cracks, revealing disgust with Gary's behavior. Of course, Lucy responds with perfect composure. I'm always interested in learning about effective leadership approaches. Gary's phone buzzes. Gary Morrison, please report to conference room A on the 42nd floor immediately. The board requests your attendance for a leadership review meeting. Gary assumes the meeting represents recognition of his successful Lucy situation handling, perhaps commendation for decisive leadership in addressing problematic employees. Looks like the board wants to discuss yesterday's team management, Gary says with smug satisfaction, probably seeking insights about handling difficult personnel transitions. As Gary heads toward the elevator, straightening his tie with confident satisfaction, Lucy allows herself the first genuine smile in 24 hours. In 2 minutes, Gary will discover the board meeting isn't about commending his leadership, it's about terminating it. Gary steps into the executive elevator, believing he's about to receive commendation for masterful handling of a difficult personnel situation. His reflection shows a professional convinced that his systematic destruction of Lucy demonstrated exactly the decisive leadership Sterling Dynamics values. As the elevator rises past floors of unknowing employees, Gary mentally rehearses his presentation about proactive management of the Lucy situation, positioning yesterday's public humiliation as strategic leadership development. 42nd floor, announces the computerized voice. Gary steps out with the confidence of someone who's spent 24 hours proving dominance over a powerless subordinate. But approaching conference room A, Gary experiences uncertainty. Through glass walls, he sees the full Sterling Dynamics board assembled, not the small consultation he'd expected, but something formal and comprehensive. Inside conference room A, the board has arranged itself with tribunal precision. CEO Richard Sterling sits at the head, flanked by Dr. Patricia Wells and COO Yervin Matthews. The atmosphere carries the weight of executives who've reviewed damning evidence and reached unanimous conclusions. Before Gary arrives, Sterling says, today's discussion represents not just personnel management, but a statement about Sterling Dynamics' commitment to ethical leadership culture. The evidence demonstrates behavior contradicting every value this company represents. Dr. Wells displays Lucy's comprehensive report synthesizing months of strategic observation with yesterday's systematic documentation. The behavioral patterns are consistent with classic workplace manipulation tactics. CFO Duke Rodriguez reviews financial impact analysis. The hidden costs of Gary's leadership style are substantial. Employee turnover, recruitment expenses, and decreased productivity create operational inefficiencies undermining departmental profitability. 3 floors below, Lucy receives CEO Sterling's text, "Please proceed to conference room A. The board is ready for your presentation." Amanda notices Lucy gathering comprehensive materials. "Are you heading somewhere?" "Board meeting," Lucy replies simply, watching Amanda's expression shift from confusion to realization that something significant is happening beyond normal operations. Duke and Carla observe Lucy's departure with growing awareness that yesterday's events were more complex than Gary's narrative suggested. The woman walking toward the executive elevator moves with boardroom confidence, not uncertain junior employee demeanor. Did anyone notice Lucy never seemed actually intimidated by Gary's performance? Carla whispers. "I was thinking the same thing," Duke responds. Her responses were too strategic, like she was documenting everything instead of defending herself. Gary enters conference room A with practiced executive presence, noting the formal atmosphere and comprehensive board attendance. "Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss departmental leadership strategies." "Please sit down, Gary," CEO Sterling responds with neutral professionalism that doesn't match Gary's expectations. The indicated chair positions Gary directly across from assembled board members, creating the subtle dynamic of someone being evaluated rather than consulted. "We've conducted a comprehensive review of marketing department operations," Sterling continues, "including detailed analysis of leadership effectiveness, team dynamics, and client relationship management." Gary's confidence wavers at review, but he reassures himself that any investigation would validate his successful handling of challenging personnel situations. As Gary processes that this meeting isn't proceeding according to expectations, the conference room door opens to admit Lucy Rodriguez with the composed professionalism of someone who belongs in boardroom discussions, carrying materials suggesting comprehensive preparation rather than hasty junior employee notes. "What is she doing here?" Gary asks with genuine confusion, his executive composure cracking as he tries to understand why a junior coordinator would be included in senior leadership discussion. "Gary," CEO Sterling says with carefully considered gravity, "I'd like you to meet Lucy Rodriguez, the strategic leadership consultant we hired 6 months ago to conduct comprehensive evaluation of our marketing department's culture and effectiveness." The words hit Gary like physical blows. Strategic leadership consultant. 6 months of evaluation. Comprehensive assessment. Every assumption about Lucy's position, purpose, and powerlessness crumbles in devastating clarity. Ms. Rodriguez has spent considerable time observing leadership dynamics within the marketing department, Sterling continues, with particular focus on management approaches, team development strategies, and client relationship protocols. Gary's face drains of color, realizing the woman he's spent 24 hours systematically humiliating isn't a powerless junior employee, but a board-appointed consultant documenting every aspect of his leadership behavior for half a year. Lucy settles beside Dr. Wells with calm composure of someone preparing for this moment through months of strategic patience. She opens her comprehensive report, hundreds of pages of documentation, analysis, and evidence that will reshape Gary Morrison's understanding of power, consequences, and the price of underestimating the wrong person. "Shall we begin?" Lucy asks with perfect professional courtesy, her voice carrying no trace of vindictive satisfaction she feels watching Gary finally comprehend the magnitude of his miscalculation. Gary Morrison sits in stunned silence as the full implications of Lucy's true identity crash over him, like a tsunami of professional destruction. Strategic leadership consultant. 6 months of observation. Board-appointed evaluation. Each phrase reverberates through his consciousness, dismantling every assumption he's made about power, control, and his own position within Sterling Dynamics. "That's impossible," Gary finally manages, his voice cracking with the strain of processing information that contradicts everything he believed about the past 24 hours. "She's a junior coordinator. I saw her badge, her desk assignment, her—" He trails off as he realizes how easily badges can be fabricated and desk assignments manipulated when the deception serves a strategic corporate purpose. Lucy opens her comprehensive report with the calm efficiency of a professional who has been preparing for this moment through months of meticulous documentation. "Gary," she begins, her voice carrying the authority of someone who finally no longer needs to pretend powerlessness. "I've been observing your leadership approach since my initial consultation with Sterling Dynamics 6 months ago." The conference room's atmosphere becomes electric with tension, as Gary's mind races through implications he's only beginning to comprehend. Every interaction, every humiliation, every moment of psychological warfare he's inflicted on Lucy has been documented by someone with direct access to the company's highest decision-makers. During yesterday's extended observation period, Lucy continues, "I was able to document comprehensive examples of workplace manipulation, employee intimidation, and systematic suppression of team innovation that confirm concerns raised by previous departmental evaluations." Gary's face cycles through expressions of disbelief, horror, and growing panic as he realizes that his masterful demonstration of dominance has actually been a performance of professional self-destruction, captured in detail by the one person he most wanted to destroy. Dr. Patricia Wells activates the conference room's presentation system, displaying Lucy's executive summary on the wall-mounted screens that surround Gary like an inescapable verdict. The behavioral patterns documented over the past 6 months indicate consistent leadership dysfunction that threatens both employee retention and client relationships, she reads from Lucy's report. Gary watches in mounting horror as his own words from yesterday appear on screen, captured in audio and transcribed with devastating precision. "Sometimes you have to know when to let go of personal pride and accept that maybe, just maybe, your instincts aren't always right." The irony of seeing his own manipulation tactics quoted back to him in a formal board presentation creates a surreal moment of psychological reversal. Gary realizes he's experiencing exactly the kind of public humiliation he inflicted on Lucy, but with stakes that will destroy his career rather than just his confidence. Page 12 documents systematic client relationship mismanagement, CEO Sterling notes, reviewing Lucy's analysis. CEO Sterling notes, reviewing Lucy's analysis. Henderson Industries specifically requested alternative project leadership, citing communication problems and strategic misalignment under Mr. Morrison's direction. Gary's stomach drops as he realizes that his signature client success story has been revealed as a relationship problem that threatens one of Sterling Dynamics' most valuable accounts. The professional achievements he's used to justify his toxic leadership approach have been exposed as facades masking operational dysfunction. The financial impact analysis is particularly concerning, adds CFO Duke Rodriguez, displaying cost calculations that Gary has never seen before. Employee turnover, recruitment expenses, and decreased productivity under Mr. Morrison's leadership have created operational inefficiencies that undermine departmental profitability by an estimated $2.3 million annually. Lucy's presentation includes testimonials from marketing team members, gathered through months of strategic conversations that Gary assumed were casual workplace interactions. Amanda's concerns about departmental morale, Duke's observations about fear-based management, Carla's insights about suppressed innovation, even Lucas's uncomfortable recognition of inappropriate workplace dynamics. Team members consistently reported feeling unable to contribute meaningfully to strategic discussions. Lucy reads from her analysis, citing fear of professional retaliation for perspectives that differed from established authority preferences. Gary recognizes quotes from his own team members, words spoken in confidence that he assumed demonstrated loyalty but actually revealed growing dissatisfaction with his leadership approach. The people he believed supported his authority have been quietly documenting his failures for months. Most devastating is the revelation that his recent successes have been achieved despite not because of his leadership style. Team productivity metrics show increased innovation and efficiency during Gary's absences, suggesting that his management approach actively impedes rather than enhances departmental performance. The behavioral observation period confirmed these patterns through direct documentation. Lucy continues, advancing to video and audio evidence from yesterday's systematic humiliation campaign. Mr. Morrison demonstrated classic manipulation tactics including impossible deadline assignments, public critique designed to undermine confidence, and systematic isolation strategies. The most damning evidence comes from client feedback that Gary never knew existed. Henderson Industries project manager appears via video conference, providing real-time testimony about Gary's leadership approach from the client perspective. We specifically requested to work with the team member who conducted our preliminary strategic analysis, the client explains to the assembled board. However, Mr. Morrison consistently redirected discussions toward his own perspectives, which didn't align with our stated objectives or market understanding. Gary realizes the client is referring to Lucy's work during her interview process, strategic analysis that he'd assumed was routine consultant evaluation, but was actually comprehensive client engagement that demonstrated her superior understanding of their needs. We were particularly impressed by Ms. Rodriguez's strategic framework for addressing our market positioning challenges, the client continues. Her approach demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking we hoped to find at Sterling Dynamics. The revelation hits Gary like a physical blow. Not only has Lucy been documenting his failures, but she's been actively demonstrating her superior capabilities to the clients he assumed supported his leadership. As the presentation concludes, Gary finally understands the full scope of his miscalculation. The woman he once dismissed as naive and incompetent has spent 2 years developing the strategic thinking and professional capabilities that have made her invaluable to Sterling Dynamics board. Her apparent powerlessness was strategic positioning, her calm responses were professional composure, and her patient documentation was methodical preparation for his systematic destruction. Gary, CEO Sterling says, with the finality of someone delivering a verdict that has been months in the making, the evidence presented by Ms. Rodriguez demonstrates leadership behavior that contradicts every value Sterling Dynamics claims to represent. Your approach to team management, client relationships, and professional development creates liability risks that we cannot accept. Lucy watches Gary's face as he processes the complete reversal of everything he believed about power, control, and consequences. The man who once told her she'd never amount to anything is discovering that she's amounted to everything. He's not competent, ethical, strategic, and genuinely respected by both colleagues and clients. The board has made some decisions about departmental restructuring, Sterling continues, which Ms. Rodriguez will now present as part of her recommendations for cultural transformation and leadership transition. Gary looks at Lucy with a mixture of horror and grudging recognition, finally understanding that the woman sitting across from him isn't the same person he destroyed 2 years ago. She's become everything he pretended to be, while he's revealed himself to be everything she's risen above. The power dynamic has shifted so completely, so irrevocably, that Gary Morrison is about to experience the professional consequences he once threatened others with delivered by the one person he most underestimated. Lucy stands with the composed authority of someone who has earned her position through competence rather than manipulation, positioning herself at the presentation display where Gary once dominated team meetings through intimidation. The symbolic reversal is impossible to miss. The woman he systematically humiliated now commands the boardroom where his career will be decided. Based on 6 months of comprehensive analysis, Lucy begins, her voice carrying the confidence of someone presenting strategic recommendations to executives who respect her judgment. I'm recommending immediate leadership transition within the marketing department, followed by systematic cultural restructuring to address the operational dysfunction documented in my report. Gary watches in paralyzed fascination as Lucy effortlessly demonstrates the kind of strategic thinking and executive presence he's always claimed to possess. Her presentation flows with the professional polish of someone who genuinely understands business strategy, client relations, and team leadership, not the superficial knowledge Gary has used to mask his inadequacies. The current management structure has created a culture of fear that actively suppresses the innovation Sterling Dynamics needs to maintain competitive advantage. Lucy continues, advancing to charts that show productivity metrics, client satisfaction scores, and employee retention data that paint a devastating picture of Gary's actual impact on departmental performance. CEO Sterling nods approvingly as Lucy outlines specific recommendations for leadership restructuring. Ms. Rodriguez, your analysis suggests that departmental performance would improve dramatically under different management approaches. Substantially, Lucy confirms, displaying evidence that Gary has never seen. Team productivity increases by an average of 34% during current leadership's absences, suggesting that management style actively impedes rather than enhances professional performance. Dr. Patricia Wells opens a manila folder that Gary recognizes with growing dread, his personnel file, now updated with Lucy's comprehensive documentation of his leadership failures. Gary, the board has reviewed Ms. Rodriguez's findings and reached unanimous conclusions about necessary organizational changes. Your position as Senior Director of Creative Marketing will be eliminated effective immediately, CEO Sterling announces with the clinical precision of someone delivering a verdict that serves both justice and business necessity. The role's responsibilities will be restructured under different leadership to address the cultural and operational issues identified in this evaluation. Gary's mind reels as he processes the complete destruction of his professional status. Senior Director, the title he'd wielded like a weapon against subordinates, the authority he'd used to justify his toxic behavior, simply eliminated as if it had never existed. Additionally, Sterling continues, your employment with Sterling Dynamics will be terminated with immediate effect. Security will escort you from the building once this meeting concludes. The words hit Gary like physical blows. Terminated. Immediate effect. Security escort. The professional humiliation he'd inflicted on others for years is now being delivered to him with systematic precision by the woman he once dismissed as powerless. Lucy advances to her final presentation slide, revealing organizational charts that show her true position within Sterling Dynamics' restructured hierarchy. The board has approved my appointment as Director of Strategic Marketing Operations, with immediate responsibility for departmental leadership, client relationship management, and team development. Gary stares at the organizational chart in disbelief. Lucy's new position doesn't just replace his authority, it exceeds it with expanded responsibilities that reflect the board's confidence in her strategic capabilities and leadership potential. Ms. Rodriguez will implement comprehensive cultural reforms designed to create collaborative, innovation-focused team dynamics, Dr. Wells explains. Her approach emphasizes talent development, client satisfaction, and measurable performance outcomes, everything the current structure has failed to achieve. The irony is devastating. Gary's systematic destruction of Lucy has provided the board with evidence they needed to justify promoting her to a position of greater authority than he ever possessed. His cruelty has become the catalyst for her professional elevation beyond his former reach. The marketing team will transition to Ms. Rodriguez's leadership immediately, CEO Sterling announces. Given her comprehensive understanding of departmental dynamics and proven strategic capabilities, we anticipate immediate improvements in team morale, client satisfaction, and operational efficiency. Gary realizes that Amanda, Duke, Carla, and even Lucas, the people he believed he controlled through fear and manipulation, will now report to the woman he spent yesterday trying to destroy. The team he thought belonged to him will discover that their tormentor has been eliminated while their previously powerless colleague has become their empowered leader. Lucy's expression remains professionally neutral, but Gary can see the satisfaction in her eyes as she contemplates leading the same people who witnessed his systematic cruelty. Not revenge, exactly, but justice, creating the kind of collaborative, respectful workplace culture that Gary's toxicity had made impossible. As security arrives to escort Gary from the building, Lucy delivers her final comment with perfect professional courtesy that somehow makes it more devastating than any display of vindictive satisfaction. Gary, I want you to know that your leadership approach taught me valuable lessons about the kind of manager I never want to become. The words carry multiple layers of meaning. Acknowledgement that his toxicity had indeed affected her, but also confirmation that she's risen above his influence to become everything he failed to be. Her success represents not just personal vindication, but professional evolution beyond his comprehension. Your personal belongings will be packed and shipped, CEO Sterling informs Gary as security waits respectfully but firmly by the conference room door. All company property, access credentials and client information must remain with Sterling Dynamics. Gary stands on unsteady legs, his expensive suit and executive accessories now seeming like costumes for a role he no longer possesses. The man who entered this room expecting commendation for decisive leadership leaves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of toxic management. As Gary reaches the conference room door, he turns back for one final look at Lucy, now seated at the head of the table where board members are already discussing implementation timelines for her strategic recommendation. The woman he once told would never amount to anything has amounted to his complete professional replacement and more. Gary Morrison's final journey through Sterling Dynamics unfolds like a corporate death march witnessed by hundreds of employees who have no idea they're watching the end of a career built on manipulation and intimidation. Security escorts him through the executive corridor, past the marble reception area where he once commanded respect, toward the elevators that will carry him away from the authority he believed was permanently his. As they wait for the elevator, Gary catches his reflection in the polished brass doors, the same surfaces where Lucy had seen her own temporary badge just 24 hours earlier. The irony isn't lost on him, he's experiencing the same humiliation he inflicted on others, but amplified by the public nature of his professional destruction. Employees throughout the building notice the security escort, whispering among themselves about what could necessitate such dramatic action against a senior director. Gary's face burns with shame as he realizes that within hours everyone at Sterling Dynamics will know about his termination, his professional failures, and the circumstances that led to his downfall. The elevator doors close on Gary's corporate life with the same finality that once sealed other people's fates under his toxic leadership, but this time, he's the one being eliminated, discarded by an organization that has finally recognized the cost of tolerating his behavior. 3 floors below, the marketing department buzzes with confused energy as Amanda Fields calls asking about Gary's whereabouts and the rumors of executive meetings involving their department. Duke and Carla exchange meaningful glances, remembering their earlier observations about Lucy's unusual composure and strategic thinking. Amanda, Duke says quietly, approaching her desk with growing awareness that yesterday's events might have been more complex than they appeared. Did you notice anything different about Lucy's responses to Gary's management style? Amanda pauses her work, considering the question carefully. Now that you mention it, she never seemed actually intimidated. More like she was documenting everything instead of defending herself. Carla joins their conversation with similar observations. I kept thinking her strategic insights were too sophisticated for someone supposedly struggling with basic job requirements. Her Henderson Industries analysis was more comprehensive than anything we've produced in months. Lucas approaches hesitantly, clearly processing his own discomfort with yesterday's public humiliation session. I felt weird taking notes during that meeting, he admits. It seemed more like workplace bullying than legitimate management feedback. The team begins to reconstruct yesterday's events through a new lens of understanding, recognizing manipulation tactics they'd been too intimidated or naive to identify in real time. Gary's systematic destruction of Lucy now appears as evidence of his own professional inadequacy rather than her incompetence. At 11:30 a.m., CEO Richard Sterling's assistant distributes a company-wide email that transforms speculation into official reality. Effective immediately, Gary Morrison's position as Senior Director of Creative Marketing has been eliminated due to organizational restructuring. Lucy Rodriguez has been appointed as Director of Strategic Marketing Operations, with expanded responsibilities for departmental leadership and client relationship management. The announcement sends shockwaves through Sterling Dynamics' 47 floors as employees process the dramatic leadership change. Gary Morrison, gone. Lucy Rodriguez, promoted to a position of greater authority than Gary ever held. The reversal seems impossible to anyone who wasn't privy to the board's strategic evaluation process. In the marketing department, the news hits like a revelation that recontextualizes everything the team witnessed over the past 24 hours. Amanda stares at her computer screen, understanding flooding her face as she realizes Lucy's true identity and purpose. She was evaluating Gary the entire time, Carla whispers with dawning comprehension. Every question she asked, every response she gave, she was documenting his leadership approach for the board. The team members who witnessed Gary's systematic humiliation of Lucy now understand they were actually watching his professional suicide, performed in front of the one person with power to end his career. Henderson Industries responds to news of the leadership change with immediate relief and enthusiasm. "We're thrilled to work directly with Ms. Rodriguez," their project manager tells Amanda during an impromptu conference call. "Her strategic understanding of our market positioning challenges exceeded our expectations from our initial consultations." The revelation that Lucy had been working with their most important client for months, while Gary assumed he controlled that relationship, provides final confirmation of his complete misunderstanding of his own professional situation. Other clients respond similarly, expressing satisfaction with the leadership transition and confidence in Lucy's strategic capabilities. Gary's assumption that clients supported his management approach proves to be another delusion supported by his inability to recognize his own professional failures. Amanda compiles client feedback for Lucy's review, noting the consistent theme: relief at working with someone who listens to their needs rather than imposing predetermined solutions. At noon, Lucy returns to the marketing floor, not as a powerless junior coordinator, but as the department's new leader. The transformation in her presence is immediately apparent. The confidence that Gary mistook for insubordination now reveals itself as genuine executive authority. Team meeting, Lucy announces, her voice carrying natural leadership presence rather than Gary's manufactured intimidation. Conference room A in 5 minutes. "We have some exciting changes to discuss." The same conference room where Gary delivered his character assassination of Lucy yesterday now hosts her first official meeting as department director. The symbolic reversal creates a moment of poetic justice that isn't lost on anyone present. First, Lucy begins, "I want to acknowledge that yesterday's events were inappropriate and unprofessional. That kind of workplace behavior will never occur under my leadership." The team visibly relaxes as Lucy establishes ground rules based on respect, collaboration, and professional development, rather than fear and intimidation. Duke straightens in his chair. Carla leans forward with interest. Even Lucas seems energized by the prospect of working without constant fear of public humiliation. Second, Lucy continues, "I've reviewed your individual contributions over the past months, and I'm impressed by the talent and innovation that previous management failed to recognize or develop." Amanda feels tears of relief threatening as she realizes the toxic atmosphere that had made her dread coming to work has been eliminated overnight. The department that seemed headed for continued dysfunction has been transformed into an environment where talent can flourish. As Lucy outlines her vision for collaborative leadership, strategic innovation, and client-focused excellence, the marketing team experiences something they hadn't felt in 18 months under Gary's toxic management: hope for professional growth and job satisfaction. The immediate consequences of Gary's downfall extend far beyond his personal career destruction. They represent liberation for everyone who suffered under his leadership, and vindication for ethical workplace culture throughout Sterling Dynamics. Within hours of Lucy's appointment, the marketing department undergoes a dramatic atmospheric transformation that would have seemed impossible under Gary's toxic leadership. The tension that had permeated every interaction for 18 months dissipates as team members experience their first taste of collaborative, respectful management. Amanda finds herself smiling genuinely for the first time in months as she coordinates meetings without fear of Gary's unpredictable outbursts or public humiliation tactics. "It's like being able to breathe again," she confides to Duke during their lunch break. "I didn't realize how much stress I was carrying until it was gone." Duke nods in agreement, noting how his chronic insomnia has already begun improving just knowing he won't face daily psychological warfare at work. "I was actually updating my resume last week," he admits. "Gary's management style was making me question whether I even belonged in marketing." The creative energy that Gary had systematically suppressed begins emerging as team members tentatively share ideas they'd kept hidden for fear of ridicule or professional retaliation. Carla presents a client strategy she'd developed months earlier, but never dared propose under Gary's regime. Lucas volunteers insights about market trends that demonstrate analytical capabilities Gary had dismissed as inadequate. Henderson Industries schedules an emergency strategy session for that afternoon, expressing eagerness to work directly with Lucy on campaign development. Their project manager's enthusiasm creates a stark contrast to the strained client relationships that had characterized Gary's tenure.
Miss
Rodriguez, the client explains during their video conference, "We've been hoping for this kind of strategic partnership since our initial consultation. Your understanding of our market positioning challenges suggests collaboration possibilities we hadn't considered under previous project leadership." Lucy facilitates the discussion with natural ease, asking insightful questions that demonstrate genuine interest in the client's success, rather than Gary's self-serving approach to relationship management. The team watches in fascination as Lucy transforms client interaction from adversarial negotiation into collaborative problem-solving. "This is how client meetings should feel," Carla whispers to Amanda, "like we're partners working toward shared goals instead of vendors trying to avoid criticism." By day's end, Henderson Industries has expanded their contract scope and requested Lucy's team for 2 additional projects, validation that Gary's client management approach had been actively limiting business development opportunities. Word of Gary's termination and Lucy's promotion spreads through Chicago's marketing community with remarkable speed, generating responses that illuminate Gary's professional reputation beyond Sterling Dynamics' walls. Former colleagues express relief rather than surprise, sharing stories about Gary's toxic behavior at industry events and professional associations. Elena Vasquez from Chicago Business Weekly calls Lucy for comment on what she's positioning as a major story about corporate accountability and ethical leadership transformation. "The industry's response has been overwhelmingly positive," Elena reports. Multiple sources have confirmed similar concerns about Gary Morrison's professional conduct spanning several years. Patricia Wells forwards messages from other companies expressing interest in Lucy's strategic consulting services, suggesting that her reputation for ethical leadership and strategic excellence extends far beyond Sterling Dynamics. "You've become something of a legend in corporate culture circles," Wells explains. The story of transforming workplace toxicity into professional opportunity resonates with executives throughout the city. Marcus Chen, from Executive Dynamics, reports receiving inquiries from competitors hoping to recruit Lucy, validation that her strategic approach to corporate culture reform represents valuable expertise in the current business environment. Alone in her new office, the same corner space where Gary once wielded his toxic authority, Lucy processes the magnitude of her professional transformation. The view of Chicago's skyline, that Gary used to symbolize his dominance, now represents possibilities for ethical leadership and strategic innovation. She opens the desk drawer to find Gary's abandoned personal items, expensive pens, ego-stroking awards, and photographs that showcase his superficial accomplishments. The contrast between his materialistic displays of success and her evidence-based approach to leadership effectiveness illustrates the fundamental difference between their professional philosophies. Lucy's phone contains dozens of congratulatory messages from colleagues, mentors, and clients who have followed her journey from Gary's victim to his professional replacement. Each message validates her decision to transform humiliation into strategic opportunity, rather than accepting defeat as permanent limitation. Most meaningful is a text from her former professor: "You've proven that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be while helping others reach their potential too." Meanwhile, Gary Morrison sits in his Lincoln Park penthouse, surrounded by the trappings of success that no longer reflect his actual professional status. His expensive furniture and luxury accessories feel like museum pieces from a career that ended in spectacular failure and public humiliation. His phone remains ominously silent, no calls from colleagues offering support, no messages from clients expressing concern about his departure, no industry contacts reaching out with alternative opportunities. The professional network he assumed valued his leadership reveals itself as relationships based on fear rather than respect. Gary's attempts to contact former colleagues meet with polite deflection or outright avoidance. His reputation for toxic leadership has preceded him throughout Chicago's marketing community, making future employment prospects increasingly doubtful. The industry that once seemed to reward his manipulative approach now recognizes such behavior as liability rather than strength. Most devastating is Gary's growing awareness that his assumptions about power, success, and professional relationships were fundamentally flawed. Lucy's transformation from his victim to his replacement forces him to confront the reality that genuine leadership requires competence, integrity, and respect, qualities he never developed because manipulation seemed easier. The man who once dismissed Lucy as naive and powerless now understands that she possessed strategic thinking, emotional intelligence, and professional integrity that he mistook for weakness. His career destruction represents not random misfortune but inevitable consequences of choosing toxicity over competence. As evening settles over Chicago, Gary begins the difficult process of understanding how completely he misunderstood both Lucy's capabilities and his own professional vulnerabilities. The woman he once told would never amount to anything has amounted to everything he failed to become, and more. Sterling Dynamics' marketing department has undergone a complete cultural metamorphosis under Lucy's leadership, transforming from Gary's fear-based hierarchy into a collaborative powerhouse that other departments study as a model for effective management. The changes extend far beyond surface-level policy adjustments to fundamental shifts in how team members interact, innovate, and approach client relationships. Amanda has blossomed from a stressed administrator constantly walking on eggshells into a confident project coordinator who contributes strategic insights during client meetings. I never realized how much of my energy was spent just trying to avoid Gary's criticism, she reflects during a team retrospective session. Now I can focus on actually improving our work instead of just protecting myself from humiliation. Duke has transformed from an insomnia-plagued analyst into the department's lead strategic thinker, his natural analytical capabilities finally free to flourish, without fear of Gary's ego-driven interference. His innovative approach to market research has attracted attention from other Sterling Dynamics divisions, seeking to replicate the marketing team's dramatic performance improvements. Carla's creative capabilities, suppressed for 18 months under Gary's rigid control, have exploded into industry-recognized campaign concepts that win awards and generate substantial client satisfaction. Her confidence has grown exponentially as Lucy actively encourages risk-taking and innovation, rather than punishing creative thinking that challenges established approaches. Even Lucas has evolved from Gary's intimidated note-taker into a proactive team member whose fresh perspectives on digital marketing trends have become valuable assets for client strategy development. Lucy's quarterly performance review with CEO Richard Sterling showcases metrics that would have been impossible under Gary's toxic leadership approach. Employee satisfaction scores have increased from 23% to 89% within 3 months. Client retention has improved by 67%, with several major accounts specifically requesting contract extensions to continue working with Lucy's transformed team. The Henderson Industries account alone has generated $3.2 million in additional revenue since the leadership transition, Sterling notes, reviewing financial reports that demonstrate the tangible business impact of ethical management practices. They've referred 4 new clients specifically because of their satisfaction with your team's strategic approach. Innovation metrics tell an equally compelling story. The department has generated more patentable marketing concepts in 3 months under Lucy's leadership than in the previous 2 years under Gary's regime. Team members who once feared sharing ideas now compete to contribute creative solutions to client challenges. Most significantly, recruitment costs have plummeted as word spreads throughout Chicago's marketing community about Sterling Dynamics' transformed workplace culture. Top talent actively seeks opportunities to join Lucy's team, reversing the exodus that characterized Gary's tenure. Chicago Business Weekly publishes Elena Vasquez's comprehensive feature story about Sterling Dynamics' cultural transformation, positioning Lucy's leadership approach as a case study in modern management excellence. The article titled, "From Toxic to Transformational: How One Leader's Ethical Approach Revolutionized Corporate Culture," generates national attention from business schools and corporate leadership programs. Dr. Patricia Wells invites Lucy to present at Northwestern's MBA program, where her story of professional resilience and strategic leadership becomes required reading for courses on organizational behavior and ethical management. Lucy represents the future of corporate leadership, Wells tells her students. She demonstrates that genuine authority comes from competence, integrity, and the ability to develop others' potential. Professional associations throughout the Midwest request Lucy's insights on workplace culture transformation. Her presentation at the American Marketing Association's annual conference receives a standing ovation from industry leaders who recognize her approach as revolutionary rather than simply effective. The irony isn't lost on Lucy that Gary's attempt to destroy her professional reputation has actually elevated her to industry prominence as an expert on ethical leadership and corporate culture reform. Lucy's evening routine now includes reviewing thank you notes from team members whose careers have flourished under her supportive leadership approach. Amanda's promotion to senior project coordinator represents validation of potential that Gary had systematically suppressed. Duke's acceptance into an executive leadership program demonstrates how quickly talent develops when freed from toxic constraints. The corner office that once symbolized Gary's authoritarian control has been redesigned as an open, collaborative space where team members feel comfortable sharing ideas and seeking guidance. The intimidating furniture and power displays have been replaced with comfortable seating arrangements that encourage honest communication and creative collaboration. Lucy's personal satisfaction comes not from wielding authority over others, but from watching team members discover capabilities they never knew they possessed. Each promotion, recognition, or professional achievement by her team members reinforces her conviction that leadership's true measure lies in others' success rather than personal dominance. The marketing department's transformation has inspired cultural changes throughout Sterling Dynamics as other divisions examine their own management practices. CEO Sterling implements company-wide leadership training based on Lucy's collaborative approach, recognizing that toxic management represents organizational liability rather than effective control. Other Chicago companies begin recruiting Sterling Dynamics employees, hoping to acquire talent trained in Lucy's ethical leadership methodology. The ironic result is that Sterling Dynamics becomes a more attractive employer as word spreads about their transformed workplace culture. Gary's former behavior now serves as a cautionary tale in corporate leadership seminars throughout the region. Business schools use documented examples of his toxic management style to illustrate how unethical leadership creates measurable financial damage while destroying human potential. The transformation extends beyond Sterling Dynamics' walls as Lucy's approach influences industry standards for ethical management practices. Her methodology becomes studied, replicated, and refined by organizations seeking to prevent the kind of workplace toxicity that Gary's leadership had represented. Most significantly, the success demonstrates that corporate culture problems aren't inevitable or permanent. They're solvable through ethical leadership, strategic thinking, and genuine commitment to developing others' potential rather than protecting personal ego and authority. The woman Gary once dismissed as naive and powerless has become a transformational force, whose influence extends far beyond his former comprehension, proving that real power lies not in controlling others, but in empowering them to achieve excellence. Gary Morrison sits in a modest coffee shop in Lincoln Park, reading Elena Vasquez's Chicago Business Weekly article about Lucy's transformation of Sterling Dynamics' marketing department. The irony isn't lost on him that he's learning about his former workplace's success through media coverage rather than professional involvement. 6 months of unemployment have stripped away the external validation that masked Gary's underlying insecurities and character flaws. Without the artificial authority of his senior director position, he's been forced to confront the reality that his professional success was built on manipulation rather than competence. His expensive Lincoln Park penthouse feels like a prison decorated with symbols of achievements that now seem hollow and meaningless. The awards, certificates, and photographs that once fed his ego now serve as reminders of opportunities he squandered through toxic behavior. Gary's phone remains conspicuously silent. No calls from former colleagues, no inquiries from potential employers, no invitations to industry events. The professional network he assumed respected his leadership has revealed itself as relationships based on fear rather than genuine appreciation for his capabilities. Dr. Sarah Martinez, Gary's court-mandated therapist following a workplace harassment complaint, challenges him to examine the psychological patterns that led to his professional destruction. Gary, you've spent 6 months blaming external circumstances for your career failure. When will you be ready to examine your own role in creating those circumstances? The sessions force Gary to confront uncomfortable truths about his relationship with power, control, and validation. His need to dominate others stemmed from deep-seated insecurities about his own capabilities, insecurities that Lucy's competence had triggered and his ego had been unable to tolerate. I convinced myself that leadership meant making others feel small so I could feel important, Gary admits during a particularly difficult session. But Lucy never fought back the way I expected. She just documented everything and used my behavior against me. Dr. Martinez helps Gary understand that Lucy's calm responses weren't submission but strategic intelligence. She recognized your manipulation tactics and refused to participate in the emotional drama you were trying to create. That's why your usual methods didn't work. She was playing a completely different game. Gary's job search has been humbling in ways he never anticipated. His reputation for toxic leadership precedes him throughout Chicago's marketing community, forcing him to consider positions far below his former status. The man who once commanded a corner office now interviews for junior analyst roles with 20-somethings who view his experience with suspicion rather than respect. Your resume shows impressive achievements, says a hiring manager at a small consulting firm, but your references raise concerns about management style and team collaboration. Can you address those issues? Gary's standard deflections no longer work when potential employers have access to documented evidence of his workplace behavior. He's learning to accept responsibility for his failures rather than blaming others for their supposed inadequacies. The financial pressure of unemployment has forced Gary to downsize from his luxury lifestyle, selling expensive possessions and moving to a modest apartment that reflects his actual rather than inflated sense of self-worth. Gary encounters Lucy by chance at a downtown Starbucks, the first time they've been in the same space since his termination 6 months earlier. The contrast between their current circumstances is stark. Lucy carries herself with the confident professionalism of someone whose career is flourishing, while Gary appears diminished by months of rejection and forced self-reflection. "Hello, Gary," Lucy says with polite neutrality, neither gloating over his downfall nor offering false sympathy for his circumstances. "Lucy," Gary responds, struggling to find appropriate words for someone whose life he tried to destroy, but who emerged stronger than ever. "I've been reading about your success at Sterling Dynamics." The conversation that follows is awkward but necessary. Gary finds himself genuinely curious about Lucy's leadership approach, recognizing that her methods produce the kind of sustainable success his manipulation tactics never achieved. "I need to say something," Gary continues, his voice lacking the arrogant confidence that once characterized his every interaction. "What I did to you, both 2 years ago and at Sterling Dynamics, was wrong. Not just professionally inappropriate, but morally inexcusable." Lucy listens without interrupting, recognizing that Gary's apology represents genuine remorse rather than strategic manipulation. His body language shows none of the calculating dominance she remembers. Instead, she sees someone genuinely grappling with the consequences of his choices. "I spent years convincing myself that success required making others feel inferior," Gary continues. "But watching your transformation, the way you've built something positive instead of just tearing others down, has forced me to confront how empty my approach really was." He pauses, gathering courage for the most difficult admission. "You were right about everything. Your ideas, your strategic thinking, your leadership potential. I saw it and felt threatened by it. Instead of learning from you or supporting your growth, I tried to destroy what I couldn't control." Lucy's response reflects the emotional maturity she's developed through her journey from victim to leader. "Gary, I appreciate your apology. What you did was harmful, but I've learned that carrying anger only hurts the person holding it. I hope you can find a way to use this experience constructively." As they part ways, Gary understands that Lucy's gracious response represents the kind of leadership he never developed, the ability to move beyond personal grievances toward larger purposes. Her success isn't despite his attempt to destroy her, but because she transformed his cruelty into motivation for becoming everything he failed to be. The woman he once dismissed as naive and powerless has demonstrated that real strength lies not in dominating others, but in rising above their attempts at domination while maintaining dignity and ethical principles. Lucy Rodriguez stands before the Chicago Marketing Association's annual awards ceremony, accepting the Executive Leadership Excellence Award for her transformation of Sterling Dynamics' marketing department. The irony of receiving recognition for the very leadership capabilities Gary once dismissed as inadequate creates a moment of profound professional vindication. This award represents not just individual achievement, Lucy tells the audience of industry professionals, but proof that ethical leadership and collaborative management produce superior results compared to intimidation and control. When we create environments where talent can flourish, everyone succeeds. In the audience, Dr. Patricia Wells beams with pride as her former student demonstrates the kind of leadership that transforms entire organizations. CEO Richard Sterling nods approvingly, knowing that Lucy's approach has become Sterling Dynamics' competitive advantage in attracting both top talent and major clients. Amanda, Duke, Carla, and even Lucas attend as Lucy's guests, their own career achievements serving as living proof of what becomes possible when toxic leadership is replaced with supportive development. Each team member has received promotions and recognition that would have been impossible under Gary's suppressive management style. Sterling Dynamics has become a case study in corporate culture transformation, with business schools using Lucy's methodology to teach ethical leadership principles. Her approach has been documented, refined and replicated by organizations throughout the Midwest, seeking to prevent the kind of workplace toxicity Gary's behavior represented. The marketing department's success metrics continue to exceed all projections. Client satisfaction scores remain above 95%, employee retention has reached industry-leading levels, and innovation output has tripled compared to pre-transformation baselines. Most significantly, the department has become Sterling Dynamics' most profitable division, proving that ethical leadership produces measurable financial benefits. Lucy's influence extends beyond Sterling Dynamics as she consults with other organizations facing similar leadership challenges. Her strategic approach to cultural transformation has become sought-after expertise that commands premium fees and generates speaking opportunities at major industry conferences. The woman Gary once told would never amount to anything has amounted to everything he pretended to be while building something far more sustainable and meaningful than his manipulative approach ever achieved. Gary Morrison has found employment as a junior marketing analyst at a nonprofit organization dedicated to workplace equality, a position that requires him to apply the lessons he's learned about ethical leadership and collaborative teamwork. His salary is a fraction of his former compensation, but his work contributes to preventing the kind of workplace toxicity he once perpetrated. His supervisor, Elise Thompson, is a former Sterling Dynamics employee who left during Gary's toxic tenure. Her willingness to give him a second chance represents both professional grace and careful monitoring of his behavioral changes. Gary's transformation has been remarkable, Elise notes during his 6-month performance review. He demonstrates genuine humility, accepts feedback constructively, and contributes meaningfully without seeking to dominate discussions or claim inappropriate credit. Gary's therapy sessions have helped him develop emotional intelligence and self-awareness that he'd never cultivated during his years of manipulative leadership. He now recognizes the psychological patterns that led to his professional destruction and actively works to support rather than undermine his colleagues. 2 years after their Sterling Dynamics confrontation, Lucy and Gary meet again at a professional development conference where Lucy is the keynote speaker on ethical leadership transformation. Gary attends as part of his continuing education in collaborative management practices. After Lucy's presentation, which includes anonymized case studies of workplace transformation that Gary recognizes as documenting his own behavioral patterns, he approaches her with genuine respect rather than his former arrogance. "Your presentation was excellent," Gary says simply. "The strategies you outlined for preventing toxic leadership would have helped me avoid destroying my own career if I'd been humble enough to listen." Lucy's response reflects the professional maturity that has defined her success. "Gary, I'm glad to see you're applying these principles constructively. Personal growth is possible for anyone willing to do the difficult work of honest self-examination." Their interaction demonstrates the complete transformation of their power dynamic, not through Lucy's domination of Gary but through her evolution beyond the need for such validation. while his genuine humility replaces his former toxic arrogance. As the conference concludes, Lucy reflects on the journey that transformed Gary's attempt to destroy her into the foundation for her professional excellence and positive impact on countless others' careers. The woman who once cowered under his psychological manipulation has become a transformational leader whose influence extends far beyond his former comprehension. Gary returns to his modest life with renewed commitment to applying ethical leadership principles in his daily work. His former victims have become his teachers, demonstrating that redemption is possible for those willing to abandon toxic patterns in favor of collaborative, supportive approaches to professional relationships. The story that began with Gary's confident prediction that Lucy would never amount to anything concludes with the recognition that she has amounted to everything he failed to become and more. Her success represents not revenge, but revolution in how leadership can transform organizations, develop talent, and create sustainable success through ethical practices. Most importantly, Lucy's journey proves that the best response to toxic leadership isn't reciprocal toxicity, but the demonstration of superior alternatives that make such behavior obsolete. In rising above Gary's attempts to destroy her, Lucy has built something far more valuable than revenge, a legacy of ethical leadership that will continue influencing others long after their personal conflict has become historical footnote. The woman Gary once dismissed has become everything she was always capable of being, while helping others reach their potential too, the ultimate triumph of competence, integrity, and strategic thinking over manipulation, intimidation, and toxic control. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.